Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal has been making her rounds on cable news to basically put out the messaging that we want progressives to put out in regard to the budget reconciliation bill. This is the incredibly important piece of legislation that deals with so-called human infrastructure. In reality, this is the bill that has all the social safety net programs that we need, including climate action, universal pre-K, permanent child tax credits, Medicare expansion to include important things like vision, hearing, dental, should be part of healthcare, you know what I'm saying? Lowers the Medicare eligibility age, allows for drug prices to be negotiated by Medicare. Just really important piece of legislation. Now, I love that Pramila Jayapal continues to stand her ground, as other progressives have done both on social media and in the news. So I'm going to give you an example of some of the messaging we are getting from Congressman Jayapal as this debate unfolds.
We will agree to that bipartisan bill if and only if we also pass the reconciliation bill first. That was our position. We whipped our members on it. Over half of the Progressive Caucus 3 months ago today said we will vote for both bills. We will vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is much smaller. And frankly, Rachel, it has a lot of things that our members don't like. But if we can get the reconciliation bill that has the majority of the president's agenda in it, the majority of what we ran on, then we will vote for both bills.
All right, fantastic. Now, she mentions the bipartisan infrastructure bill and how progressives don't like it, but they have agreed to vote in favor of it as long as they also get to vote for the reconciliation bill, which is the legislation that they like. Now, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, she said that progressives don't really like it. Why don't they like it? Well, it's basically a corporate handout bill, okay? It privatizes public infrastructure. It does not raise the taxes of corporations and the wealthy. It also allows for these corporations to gain incredibly lucrative government contracts in order to build the infrastructure that's noted in the legislation. And look, all of this was supposed to be one big giant bill. But conservative Democrats are like, no, I mean, we really care about bipartisanship, so we want to be able to pass a bill in a bipartisan way. Thus, they divided the bill into two different bills. One that's the corporate handout bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, of course. And then there's the budget reconciliation bill, which can be passed with a simple majority in the Senate, okay? The bipartisan bill has support from Republicans in the Senate, 19 Republican senators to be specific, because they love the corporate handouts. They love standing by their donors, and they don't really hide that. So that's what Jayapal is saying there, right? She's like, look, we agreed that we'll vote in favor of the bipartisan bill if and only if we get a vote on the budget reconciliation bill. That was the deal from the get-go. We've already made concessions in allowing for this legislation to be split in two. So let's go for it. Let's make this happen. We are going to hold up to our part of the deal, and we're expecting conservative Democrats to do the same. Now, she repeated similar points while talking to other cable news shows. Let's take a look at that.
Once you come to that moment, as the speaker was talking about, will you issue an ultimatum that it is either two bills or it is no bills? That progressives are either going to say, hey, get on board with both of these, or we are not on board with the smaller bipartisan bill?
We've done that already, and in fact, we did it 3 months ago. We've been saying that consistently, that we will vote for the bipartisan bill, even though many of our members do not like what is in the bipartisan bill, but we have to get the reconciliation bill done at the same time. We've got to be able to say to the American people that we are not going to wait on childcare. We're not going to wait on paid leave. We're not going to wait on healthcare. It isn't enough just to do this much smaller roads and bridges bill. We've got to get the other pieces done as well that are so urgent. So we've already told the speaker that. Over half of our caucus has said that they would not be able to vote for one bill without the other.
Now, we're gonna get back to CNN's Breonna Keeler in just a minute because there was more from that interview that's worth unpacking. But this is where this segment gets good because it appears that CNN has somehow passed around an internal memo telling its hosts to frame their questions toward Pramila Jayapal in a very specific way. And you're gonna get what I'm talking about in this example featuring Jake Tapper. Let's watch.
If you and the Progressive Caucus vote to defeat the bipartisan infrastructure bill because the bigger budget package hasn't passed first, then you are basically hurting President Biden and his agenda and the ability of Democrats to do anything else going forward.
Well, several things. I mean, first of all, this is the president's agenda. What we are fighting for is the president's agenda. It's actually what we all ran on, and it's what voters delivered the House, the Senate, and the White House to us to deliver back to them.
So did you catch that? Jake Tapper is framing the question in such a way to essentially indicate to the audience that if progressives don't cave to the demands of corporate Democrats, well, they're hurting President Joe Biden and his agenda. No, but let's rewind. What was the deal from the beginning? First of all, this was supposed to be one piece of legislation. One piece of legislation that if Biden really wanted, could have been passed through the reconciliation process, which would mean that no Republicans would be required in the Senate to pass the bill. But he wanted to play patty cakes with Republicans and pretend like unity is something that's incredibly important in Congress, right? There is unity in the electorate. The vast majority of Americans, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, want the social programs that are offered, that are being proposed in the reconciliation bill. It polls incredibly well. So what Biden could have done is he could have, played hardball with the corporate Democrats in the Senate, people like Mark Warner, Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, who are trying to be obstacles in passing, provisions that would fundamentally and materially improve the lives of working Americans. He could have done that, but instead he's like, no, let's divvy it up. Let's divvy it up. And the agreement was, as long as we get the passage of the bipartisan bill, as long as we give the American people this illusion of unity in Congress, we'll ensure that we'll also pass the reconciliation. But that was the deal. That was the deal. And progressives have already conceded. They've conceded to the amount of spending in the reconciliation bill. Bernie Sanders wanted to spend somewhere in the ballpark of $5 to $6 trillion. The bill now proposes spending $3.5 trillion. Concessions have already been made. Okay, so the people who are actually hurting Biden's agenda, Jake Tapper, are the corporate Democrats, and to be quite honest, the corporate media. Because they're perpetuating this myth about progressives standing in the way, about progressives doing harm to poor Joe Biden, the most powerful man in the world. Okay, not buying it. Now, Chris Cuomo also had his little commentary segment last night, and it was embarrassing. Why? Well, let's watch.
If the Senate, the Democrats there, if they won't give on the reconciliation price tag in a way that appeases the far left slash the president, and the response from them, from the fringe, is to stall the infrastructure bill that's been agreed on in the Senate, President Joseph Biden could literally go 0 for 2. You stave off the big lie. You stave off an insurrection. You beat the most poisonous president in a generation, only to have your own party leave you vulnerable? Are you serious?
Let me get this straight. So it's progressives who are in the wrong here? Really? I mean, I don't know. Well, look, obviously we can speculate about what the intentions are here because there's only two possibilities. Possibility number one is that the anchors or hosts at CNN don't do any research and their producers don't do any research and they're completely dumbfounded by the sequence of events. They don't know what the sequence of events were. They weren't paying attention. I mean, they're talking about these stories on a daily basis. So it's really hard to assume that they don't know what the sequence of events were. The other possibility, and I think this is a far more likely possibility, is that the corporate advertisers, the corporate interests that help fund CNN do not want the passage of the reconciliation bill. And to be sure, they do not. The US Chamber of Commerce is already spending a ton of money on advertising to attack, to target conservative Democrats who might vote in favor of the reconciliation bill, right? So there's a reason why corporations love the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's because they stand to make money off of it and it doesn't raise their taxes. The reconciliation bill is the important piece of legislation that needs to get passed. And if progressives actually follow through on what they're threatening here, if they vote no, if they block the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill because it's clear that the reconciliation bill does not have a path forward, they should be applauded. They should be celebrated because it is, in my opinion, it is not gonna hurt them politically. I think the corporate media is gonna whine and cry about it. I think that conservative Democrats are gonna whine and cry about it. But you know who's gonna be harmed by that bill? Americans, who are gonna start paying tolls and fees for roads and bridges that they're currently using for free because that infrastructure was privatized through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So honestly, I would have the worst possible outcome would be the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill with no reconciliation bill. So there's gonna be a lot of pressure for progressives to play ball and to give the corporate interests what they want, and they can't do that. It is a huge political liability for them. Now, I saved the best for last because, as I said, we're gonna go back to Keeler. And her interview and her framing was really the big kahuna of this whole segment, okay? So let's take a look at how she framed her questions.
So you're saying you're willing to take nothing because it may come to that.
Well, I'm actually saying that other people are willing to crash the entire Democratic agenda by refusing to come together on the reconciliation bill.
Your margin is so slim that you need those people. And without them, nothing gets done. Yes,
That's
and
right.
they need you for certainly.
That's right.
And so you're willing to take nothing.
No, they would be willing to take nothing.
Well, you would both.
Let's remember this is the president's agenda.
They would be willing to take. That's not true. They would be willing to take something, which is the bipartisan bill. Well, you would be willing to take nothing other than both.
The reality, Brianna, is that we are willing to deliver the entirety of the president's agenda to his desk.
But why is it all? Why is it all or nothing? Why is it all or nothing?
Well, because if we don't do the rest of the package now, we will not have childcare. We will not have paid leave. We will not have any of those things. You know how Washington works. We are now at the end of the year. Very little gets done at the end of the year, and nothing will get done next year.
So look, to be clear, this was something that we expected. We knew that eventually the messaging in corporate media would pivot to what we're seeing right before us right now, okay? So we can't fault the corporate media for being corporate media. This is what we can expect. Now, in terms of the messaging from Jayapal, obviously I agree with her strategically, and I think that making it clear that this was the agreement from the jump is important. But I'd like to see her go a little further than that, because the American people deserve to know what's really at stake, but more importantly, what's really at play in regard to the corporate interests, in regard to what's pushing for the bipartisan bill, and why it is that conservative Democrats in the Senate are threatening to block the reconciliation bill, right? So Kyrsten Sinema gets called out on this show all the time in regard to her corporate interests. I would like to see progressives, including Representative Jayapal, say on national television, hey, don't you think it's a little fascinating that Senator Kyrsten Sinema campaigned as a progressive, and now after receiving $100,000 in donations from pharmaceutical companies in the last election cycle alone, she's against allowing Medicare to negotiate for lower drug prices? Don't you think it's fascinating that Senator Joe Manchin made $500,000 last year alone from dirty coal, from his personal financial investments in dirty coal? Don't you think that kind of corruption and legalized bribery is a little bit of an issue? And once those senators start whining and crying about it, which they inevitably would do, threaten to do it more unless they play ball. This is it. This is really the opportunity, and possibly the last opportunity for progressive lawmakers to prove that they're gonna fight for the constituents, that they're gonna fight for the very people who put them in those positions of power in the first place. So again, Pramila Jayapal did fine in those interviews, but now is the time to fight hard because they're up against corporate media, they're up against corporate interests, and they're up against corrupt politicians in their own party. And they gotta start fighting like it.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.